this is a horror anthology. And now we bring you story number 1, The Tape Recorder in the Fog. In a small coastal town, the sea was perpetually churned up by winds that swept in from across the ocean, carrying with them an unnatural, thick fog that never seemed to lift. It cloaked the houses, streets and harbors in an eerie silence, muffling sound and obscuring vision. For the townspeople, it was just another Tuesday. For Daniel, a young postman who had recently transferred there, it was different. He liked the quiet solitude of his new posting, delivering letters and packages along the coast. But today something about the fog felt heavier, more oppressive than usual. He walked slowly down a narrow lane between two weathered stone walls, their lichen-covered surfaces looming close above him. At the end of the lane, he turned toward the harbor, stopping abruptly on seeing an old, mold-covered tape recorder sitting on a nearby bench. As Daniel approached it cautiously, he noticed a sticky note attached to it. In faded ink, it read, "Play when the fog returns." Curiosity piqued, Daniel tucked the tape recorder under his arm and continued on his route. When the workday finally ended, Daniel returned to the tape recorder. He brought it home, put it on his kitchen table, and then waited. The minutes ticked by, each one heavier than the last. Then he heard it, the familiar roll of the fog, creeping closer, swallowing the sounds of the sea. Daniel quickly picked up the tape recorder and hurried out into the mist. He found the bench in the gathering gloom, sat down and pressed play. A rasping man's voice filled the air. "If you're hearing this," he said, "then I'm already dead. But I didn't die alone. And you won't either." Daniel froze. His blood ran cold. He strained to listen. The man continued, "I'm sorry I have to tell you like this, but the only way I could think to warn you is through this recording. I hope you find it. I hope you can hear me. I want you to run. Please, please run." Then the voice abruptly stopped. Daniel stared at the tape recorder, his heart pounding against his ribs. What did it mean? Who was the man? And why did he sound so terrified? Was he trying to warn Daniel about something? As the fog swirled around him, Daniel made a decision. He would wait until the fog lifted, hoping to catch a glimpse of who or whatever was behind the cryptic message. So he waited patiently, listening intently. When the first rays of sunlight finally pierced the fog, he jumped up, eager to see what awaited him. But as the fog receded, he noticed something odd. Nothing. The area around the bench was empty. He looked around frantically, half expecting to see a figure standing in front of him, but there was no one there. Daniel checked the tape recorder. It was still playing. Shaken but determined to get to the bottom of this mystery, he slipped the tape back into the machine and hit play. The man's voice began to narrate what Daniel was experiencing in real time. He looks to the left. He doesn't see the man approaching. Daniel turned his head, but there was no one there. He looks back at the tape recorder, the voice continued. He's confused, but intrigued enough to listen further. And then, he stands up. He's going to go back. He wants answers. Daniel hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity, before slowly turning back toward the spot where he'd found the tape recorder. He sees nothing. "It's all fog," the voice said. He's getting frustrated. He can't understand what's happening. The voice was right. Daniel couldn't see anything in the swirling fog and he was starting to panic. He takes a step forward. Another step, the voice said, he's reaching out to touch the fog. And then, he feels something solid. Something like wood. He touches it again, this time harder. Daniel reached out blindly and felt something hard and cold beneath his fingers. His heart pounded as he tried to make out what it was. The voice continued, he's pulling away the fog. He's revealing what's hidden beneath. As if summoned by the voice, the fog around Daniel's hand began to part, revealing a wooden board. With shaking hands, he pulled away more of the fog, revealing a metal pipe protruding from the ground. He's scared. He wants to run, but he can't. He's frozen by fear, the voice said. Daniel wanted to scream, but no sound came out. He was paralyzed by terror. He tries to scream, but no sound comes out. He falls to his knees, overwhelmed by the horror of what he's discovered. The voice paused, leaving Daniel in suffocating silence. He looked down at the pipe in disbelief, unable to comprehend what it meant or how it connected to the cryptic message. Suddenly, the voice started again. He looks up. He sees the fog rolling back in. He knows he has to escape, but it's already too late. He's trapped. The fog began to thicken around Daniel, tendrils of white coiling and twisting like ghostly serpents. The voice grew louder. The fog's closing in. It's consuming him. He struggles, but it's pointless. He's lost. And then, as quickly as it started, the voice cut off. The fog swirled around Daniel, hiding him from view. He struggled against the unseen force, his muffled screams swallowed by the thick white cloud. The next morning, the townspeople awoke to find the fog still hanging heavy over the harbor. They went about their daily routines, their faces etched with the weariness that came with living in a place where the sun rarely shone. One of them noticed the tape recorder on the bench. Its surface was scratched and dusty, the tape having been played and replayed countless times. The townsperson picked it up, turning it over in their hands. They knew the story behind it, having witnessed the strange occurrences themselves the night before. They pressed play. The tape whirred, but there was no sound. They turned it up, but the only response was a faint crackle. They looked at each other, sharing a knowing glance. They understood the significance of the blank tape. That day, a woman walked along the coast, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She was beautiful, with long flowing hair and eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of the sea. Behind her, the fog rolled in, swallowing the sound of her footsteps. She quickened her pace, her eyes wide with fear. She had heard the voice on the tape, and she knew what it meant. She had seen what happened to those who stayed. She wasn't going to be one of them. But as she ran, a strange sensation crept upon her. She felt eyes on her back, a presence moving with her. She risked a glance over her shoulder, but the fog was thick, obscuring her vision. Then she heard it, the sound of footsteps, heavy and slow, gaining on her. She broke into a run, her lungs burning, legs aching. She dared not look back, but she could feel his presence drawing closer. She stumbled and fell, scraping her hands on the rough pavement. But she didn't stop. She scrambled to her feet and ran on, her heart pounding against her ribs. But the fog was everywhere, and it seemed to be closing in, trapping her. She could feel his breath on her neck, hear his voice in her ear. "It's no use, my dear," he whispered. "You can't escape what's coming for you." She screamed, her voice lost in the fog, swallowed by the white abyss. The fog thickened, enveloping her completely. And then it was as if she had never been there at all. Except sometimes when the fog was just right, people would swear they saw a woman running along the coast, her face pale with terror, her eyes wide and frantic, forever fleeing from the inevitable. Others would hear the sound of footsteps pounding on the pavement, heavy and slow, always gaining, never giving up the chase. Some even claimed to hear a voice carried on the wind, whispering their name, beckoning them to follow. But those who listened never came back. And so the people of the town learned to stay inside when the fog rolled in, to keep their windows shut and their doors locked, for they knew what waited outside was not of this world, and once it got in, there was no escape. Story 2, The Lighthouse Keeper's Letter. A year ago, a freak windstorm wiped out the last remaining lighthouse on Widow's Cliff. It was an old abandoned structure that no one had occupied for over a decade, but it was still maintained. They cleared the rocks and debris away, and then someone noticed a small depression in the rocks where something had been buried. It was a metal box. It said, "To whomever finds this." Curiosity got the better of the foreman. The ink was black and thick, and the paper was stained with dried blood. The date at the top read June 18th. So this letter had been written nearly 2 weeks before the lighthouse was destroyed. He cleaned off the box and then pried it open. The nights were long and the fog hung low, stretching out across the cliff. I stood at the edge and watched them move about. Their forms flickered in and out of existence. I could never get a good look at them. They always seemed to vanish at the edge of my vision. The room filled with fog and the thing came closer, its form becoming more solid, its face taking shape. I recognized it from the cliffs then. It was one of the eyeless things. I spent the next few days gathering rocks and sand and sealing off the windows. That way, the fog couldn't reach inside and I would be safe. At least until the next night. It looked different this time, somehow more solid. And as it rose to its feet, I could swear it was smiling. It wanted to get to the light. But the light was my protection. I wouldn't let anything extinguish it. By midday, the sun was shining. The air was warm and everything was still. There was not a sound or a cloud in the sky. Perfect weather for a lighthouse keeper, I guess. I could feel the vibrations in my bones. Then it started scratching at the door. It scratched and clawed until it broke through and then it lunged. Oh God, the fog is rising. I can hear their voices. They're calling me by name. They want me to come outside. Beneath it, someone had scratched, "They don't like being seen. But now they've seen you." They want me to join them in the fog. The lighthouse was destroyed shortly after and the remains were hauled away. But those who worked the cleanup detail reported hearing whispers on foggy nights, voices that called them by name. And each night the things come closer. I don't have much oil left and the stores aren't due to arrive for another month or two. Please, if you're reading this, leave. Don't come here. Whatever is out there doesn't want to be found. If the fog reaches the light before then, I'll be doomed. And I think they want that. I think they want the light extinguished. I swung the pipe, connecting with its head this time. It stumbled back, fell to the floor and dissipated into a cloud of fog. I turned the crank to make sure it was shining as bright as possible. Then I grabbed a heavy iron pipe and waited. But I saw enough to know that they weren't human. I didn't think anything of it at first. The pipe connected with its shoulder and it reeled back. And each night the fog rolls in and the whispering starts again. I've lost track. Time doesn't mean much out here. It's always dark and it's always cold. I don't know how many months it's been. It was trying to grab at the light. I hit it again and again and each blow made it more solid. Finally, it became clear. It was a creature of fog, drawn to the light and weakened by it. There were probably just some rare nocturnal bird or something. I even tried to get closer, to see them better, but I always stopped myself. Inside was a rolled-up piece of paper tied shut with a string. These things didn't seem aggressive, but it was better to be safe than sorry. My job was to stay inside and keep the light burning. And besides, I was a lighthouse keeper. It was my only companion against the darkness, my only defense against whatever might drift ashore in the dead of night. No bigger than a shoebox, barely visible beneath the rocks. And it was sealed tight with a thick layer of wax. But then entire rooms would become soaked in mist. Then the whispering started again. I turned around and there in the corner was a shape, one of the things from outside. It was hunched over, almost like it was watching me. It didn't seem to acknowledge my presence, though. It just kept inching closer to the light. Now, why they continued to maintain it when they weren't using it, I don't know. I am the keeper of the light here at Widow's Cliff, or at least I am supposed to be. I haven't had any visitors in over 6 years. I receive supplies once every few months, but other than that, I'm alone. And that is why I'm writing this letter. I don't expect anyone to find it, but if you do, please read this so that my story can come to an end and I can finally rest in peace. Maybe because it was a symbol of hope for the town or something. But either way, the lighthouse was destroyed. This spring, they sent a cleanup crew to what was left of Widow's Cliff. There was no identifying marks on the box, but in the dirt at the top, there was a piece of paper with what looked like an address scrunched onto it. He untied the string and started to unroll the paper, revealing a handwritten letter. Every night I hear my name being whispered. The letter began, "My name is Marcus." Marcus continued, "For the past 6 years, I've been going insane, slowly losing my mind, and I blame this place. I blame the fog. It's always so close, just beyond my hearing, yet I hear it plain as day. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. After all, it is a lonely existence. But then I started to notice shapes moving in the fog, tall and pale and without eyes. They moved like nothing I've ever seen, sliding through the fog and scraping against the rocks. It was around the time of the equinox that I first saw them. After all, I'd seen enough horror movies to know better than to go poking around in things I wasn't familiar with. Then the fog started coming into the lighthouse. At first, it was just a draft, a cold spot here or there. The next night, it happened again. The thing lurched forward and I swung. When the sun came up, the thing was gone. All that was left was the fog. I knew then what I had to do. That night, it came back, pounding against the door, screaming in a silent voice. But the fog remained. It stayed there on the floor, swirling and moving. And as I watched, it coalesced into another shape. The next morning, the fog was gone and so was the creature. But at night, the winds pick up and the temperature drops. And each night the fog gets thicker and the whispers get louder. It looked like the ink had been flung across the page, leaving splatter marks that closely resembled the shape of a hand. I have to keep writing this in case someone finds it, in case someone can warn the others, whoever comes to this god-forsaken place next. I heard movement outside. I think they're coming. I should probably hide. I have to keep the light burning. I turned on the light. But the fog was inside. It was them. It wasn't a storm. It was them. The letter ended abruptly with a blood-smeared signature. No trace of Marcus was ever found. The end. Thank you for watching. That was Story 2, The Lighthouse Keeper's Letter, Part 2 of Best Horror Stories Ever Told. Story 3, The Man in the Fog Mask. Is there such a thing as being too scared to go to work? Because that's what's happened to me. My family thinks I'm crazy, but I haven't been able to go to work since this happened. And this was over a year ago. This isn't going away like my parents thought it would. It's driving a wedge between me and my boyfriend, too. He thinks I'm making this up for attention. But I just don't want to go back to work and I can't explain why without sounding insane. How do I explain hearing whispers in the darkness, seeing shadows moving around the corner of my eyes, and then catching glimpses of a man wearing a fogged-up gas mask standing silently behind patients? Do I have any options here other than telling him everything and losing him or letting it destroy my career and living a life full of regrets? I don't know what to do. I'm a paramedic. This is my first job out of college. So far it's been fun. It's fast-paced and rewarding. That is until last night. I work solo most of the time, covering an outlying district of our city and its surrounding farmland. We get dispatched by county, not by zip code. So sometimes we end up quite a ways out into the countryside. Usually this is easy because we're driving. Our ambulances are fully equipped and stocked so we don't have to worry about anything. Most of the farms are old Victorian houses with acreage, so they have phones with direct lines to 911. It was just after midnight when the call came in. I was close enough to this one that I dropped everything. The call came from a farmhouse, deep in the woods, at least 10 minutes out from my location. When I got through to them on the radio, the caller sounded panicked and desperate. All he said was, "He's coming through the fog," then the line went dead. Dispatch couldn't get anyone else on the line, so they sent me out there with instructions to call in if I made contact. As I turned onto the long driveway leading up to the house, I could see that it was dark and imposing. I sped up my approach in case someone needed help. As I reached the top of the hill, I noticed that the fog was unusually thick in this area. You always expect fog near bodies of water or in low-lying areas, but not usually out here. Still, I knew better than to let my guard down. I was alone, it was late and it was in the middle of nowhere. I called in again to let dispatch know that I was nearing the house. "Copy that, 241. We've got units on the way now," said the dispatcher. As I pulled into the Circle Drive, I saw that there were 2 other cruisers there, each with 2 uniformed officers inside. 2 more units were on the way. Must have been a bigger problem than they originally thought. My cruiser sat close to the front door. The brick steps leading up to it were wide and grand, but also very steep. There were no lights on in the house and no sounds could be heard except for the wind blowing through the trees. The 2 officers who had arrived before me said that they'd knocked and called out but had received no answer. No one answered my knocks either. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to enter the house alone. Then I saw something odd. I noticed that the fog was not only thick outside, but inside the house as well. I figured that they must have left a window open somewhere, and the fact that no one had answered the door yet meant that no one was home. With that, I opened the door and walked right in. The officers followed closely behind me. At first, everything seemed fine. The living room was large, with high ceilings and heavy furniture. The clock on the mantel had stopped shortly after 10 p.m. the previous night. I stepped carefully over a rug on the hardwood floor and into the hallway. It was then that I noticed the fog was even thicker in here. A strange feeling came over me, like the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. I felt exposed and vulnerable, like someone was watching me. The feeling came suddenly and then just as quickly vanished. I tried to shake it off and focus on the reason that I was there. I called out, "Hello, 911, anyone here?" My voice echoed strangely through the hallway. The officers and I moved through the house, checking rooms as we went. At first, the rooms were empty, then the dining room. Each room we entered brought us further into the house. Finally, I spotted a set of swinging doors at the far end of the hall. On the other side, I could hear what sounded like breathing. I slowly pushed open the doors and found myself standing at the bottom of a flight of stairs leading to the basement. I hesitated for a moment. Going down there would take me deeper into the house and further from the door. If there was anyone in this house, I wanted them to see me coming. But the breathing grew louder and what sounded like a cough racked the person's body. Whoever was down there was in trouble and might need help. After all, I was a paramedic. I wasn't going to let some fear of mine keep me from helping someone who needed it. I descended the stairs slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the fog in front of me. The air grew cooler and damper the further down I went. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw a door slightly ajar on the far side of the basement. The breathing sound was coming from behind it. I approached the door cautiously and peered through the crack. On the other side, I saw dozens of photos strung up on wires from the ceiling, each one nailed to the wood framing with a small nail. The pictures were all of me. I recognized the places and the moments captured in the photos. Most were from orientation when I'd been given a tour of the city and the station. Others were from my first few days on the job, showing me responding to calls and assisting others on shift. Some showed me in happier moments, laughing with my partner or another paramedic. All of the photos were recent, taken within the past month. And most were completely normal. Except for one. One picture stood out amongst the rest. It was dated tomorrow, January 8, 2021. It showed me pinned to a wooden board, my hands and legs spread open. I was screaming, covered in what looked like blood. Behind me, his face was obscured by a fogged-up gas mask. He wore a dark hooded sweatshirt, gloves, and a surgical mask. His eyes were the only things visible under the fog and they were terrifying. I stumbled backwards, bumping into something solid. Startled, I turned and saw the 2 officers staring at me with equal parts shock and confusion on their faces. Before either of them could say a word, I spun around and ran, darting through the basement door and back up the stairs. I could hear the officers shout something behind me, but I didn't stop running. I burst out of the front door and into the night, not daring to look back. I didn't stop until I was safely in my cruiser. As I fumbled for the keys, trying to get the door unlocked, I could feel the fog closing in around me. It was getting thicker now, almost solid. Then I saw it move. Something large was moving through it, something tall. I struggled to unlock the door and finally slid behind the wheel. That was when the horror really hit me. The cruiser wasn't where I'd left it. I was parked next to a row of trees and the road was nowhere to be seen. In fact, there was nothing but fog as far as I could see in any direction. I hit the cruiser's emergency lights and tried to back out. But the more I drove, the deeper into the fog I got. And the more solid the fog became, the more solid everything around me became. The trees, the field, the farmhouse, they were all there, but there was no road. There was no way out. Panic seized me and I slammed my foot on the gas, hoping I'd plowed through whatever obstruction was blocking my path. Nothing. The wheels spun uselessly, spraying gravel in every direction. I threw the car into reverse and began backing up. Just as suddenly as it appeared, the fog lifted slightly, revealing the road I had been looking for. Without hesitation, I put the car in drive and sped toward the light at the end of the tunnel. I never looked back. I didn't dare look back. I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead of me. And just as suddenly as it had come, the road ended. There was nothing in front of me but solid fog. I slammed on the brakes, throwing the car into skid. I fought to keep control as the tires fought for purchase on the slick surface. My foot came off the brake and the car shot forward, bursting through the fog as if it were a thin sheet. On the other side, the world was normal. The fog was gone, replaced by a moonlit sky. The trees were no longer solid, nor was the ground. It was wet, soft earth, perfect for leaving tire tracks. And there were none. As if I'd never been there at all, I broke the illusion. Looking back, I scanned the fog-free road for any sign of the house or the officers. There was nothing. It was as though the house and the officers had been part of a dream, vivid and real, but ultimately meaningless. And then I saw him. Standing silently in the mist was a tall man wearing a fogged-up mask. He held something in his gloved hand, something shiny. He was watching me. In that instant, I understood. The whispered voices I'd heard in the basement were my own thoughts echoing back to me. I floored the accelerator and swerved away. I didn't dare look back. I didn't dare slow down. All I knew was that I had to get away from the house, from the officers and from the man in the fog mask. I raced through the darkness, praying that I wouldn't run into anything. Finally, I saw the familiar glow of the gas station at the edge of town. When I finally stopped, my hands were shaking so violently that I could barely get them to cooperate. I don't remember much after that. The next thing I knew, I was sitting upright in my bed, sunlight streaming through the window. Shaken, but relieved to be safe. I quickly got dressed and headed to work. No one believed my story. They ran a full investigation into my claims and found nothing but a missing farm boy and a few questionable photos. The farmhouse was demolished. And the thing is, no one remembers it being there. It's like it was never there at all. Until today, I've gotten used to the looks and the whispers when I tell people about what happened. But lately, I've been seeing the man in the fog mask everywhere. I see his eyes peering at me from the crowd. I hear his heavy footsteps behind me when I walk alone. Every time I turn to look, though, he's gone. This morning I got a package in the mail. It was addressed to me, but there was no return address. Inside the box, nestled and packing peanuts, was a camera. And when I wound it on, I saw a picture of myself sleeping in bed. And standing in my doorway was the man in the fog mask.